our society, being rooted in white supremacy and capitalism, and also rooted in religion, has this way of operating with people as though they're products or things to be used rather than related to.
Welcome to the Ask Ezra Intimacy Coaching Podcast, a peek behind the curtain of some of the most intimate conversations that people have with Ezra as an intimacy coach. Join us for a session already in progress.
Christina, welcome to the Ask Ezra Podcast.
Hi, thank you.
So, how did we meet?
Well, we're friends of friends. I did used to live in Southern California.
Yeah, there you go. And where are you at now?
I'm currently in Kansas City, Missouri.
So, tell me about your coaching practice.
So I do one-on-one coaching mostly. That's really what I'm most passionate about. And I work with women and femmes mostly on helping support them to come back into relationship with themselves.
Okay, that's really interesting. And so, what does that mean to come back into a relationship with yourself?
Well, I feel like from my own personal experience and from many people that I've talked with, our society, being rooted in white supremacy and capitalism, and also rooted in religion, has this way of operating with people as though they're products or things to be used rather than related to. And so we're taught like productivity over everything, and we're taught to dominate our bodies. We're taught that we are meant to be used by something. And if you're socialized as a woman, then you've got this like your body is for a man, and if it's always for someone else. And if you're socialized as a man, typically you're taught that your body is supposed to be for production and protection and used for someone else's purpose as well, like for the system or for service or whatever it is. There really isn't space for our bodies to have human rest and to have needs that that are naturally disruptive and a little bit messy. There's not really room for that in our culture. So coming back into relationship with yourself is this process of relating to yourself in a different way than we were taught to. So allowing you to see yourself as a person, and a person that you love. And even if you're not at love, a person that you respect and deserves dignity, and allow you to see yourself in that way so that you can have more peace of mind, so that you can be on your own side and be your own supporter. Because honestly, like, I know that a lot of people know this, but like your internal dialogue affects what we decide to do. And it also can be really incredibly brutal. And if we're not on our own side, those times when we do and will make mistakes are a lot harder.
Yeah, I hear that all the time. People say like, "Oh, I would never talk to anybody the way that I talk to myself." Right? Like I would never be that mean. And so it's like, why would you let that happen? Why would you let yourself be that mean to yourself?
Yeah, it's there's so many reasons for it. And like on it, this, it's like a self-protective mechanism. And like in my own life, like unpacking that has been a space of seeing where I've really tried to protect myself from vulnerability by, causing myself harm before someone else can, by rejecting myself before someone else can. And I spoke about this recently on social media, how like it's like okay and good and really vulnerable to take yourself and your work seriously, because we're taught, like, I know it's good to take things lightly, and there's an argument for that as well, but like there is this kind of persona of like, I don't care about what I do, or I don't care, so if it doesn't work out, I didn't have to be vulnerable in saying that I really wanted this thing. We're taking ourselves seriously and really owning the vulnerability of like, I actually want this, or I actually care about that, is like, it feels vulnerable because usually we're protecting ourselves with that distance.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. This I don't give a fuck attitude can really make it harder to be successful and to do what you need to do to succeed, right?
Yeah, because you're not really in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You mentioned previously that you had this religious upbringing. Can you tell me how has that impacted your relationship with yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it really impacted everything. Like within a religious upbringing, we're taught that like our instincts are not safe. They're not supportive or good. In fact, they're dangerous. Our bodies are dangerous. Our bodies are, you know, vessels of sin would be the phrasing. And so my relationship with myself was one of like heightened suspicion. I did not feel safe in my own mind or my own body because you're not your own was a common phrasing. Your body is not your own. You are not your own. There is this ownership that's outside of you where you don't control or own anything. And like, I know nothing is in our control, but like, there was this like total submission of my own instincts and my own body to something outside of myself that did not actually sit well with my body. So I had suppressed many of my own instincts and many of my own feelings around things just to conform to find belonging. So for me, this journey is deeply personal because coming back into trust with myself has been like a 12-year process and ongoing, obviously, but just like this space of trying to not trying even, but just allowing myself to settle in to the relationship that already exists. Like our body is something that like literally has been fighting for us our entire lives. My body has been fighting for me even when I was like, fighting against them. It's really powerful to have that, to have shifted back into relationship with my body and with myself through that.
Mm-hmm. When you say like your body is fighting for you, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, well, it means multiple things. Like I include the brain in this too. I really deeply believe that like every person is doing the best they can at every moment. And I really think that we can't actually know all of the things that have impacted us or brought us to the point of doing what we're doing ourselves or other people. So we don't actually have the space to make judgment on something because we don't know the ins and outs of everything, not even ourselves. Our brains and bodies are always making decisions to try to keep us alive at all times. And however that looks, whatever that means. And they're trying simultaneously to make that happen. So when we do things like quote unquote self-sabotage, there's a good fucking reason for that. We are trying to protect ourselves from pain. There is always a good reason for us doing what we do. And our bodies trying to keep us healthy, however that looks. Our brains trying to keep us healthy, however that looks. And it gets complicated because if we've had a lot of trauma, the things that we're doing might look like they're damaging to us, and they might actually be damaging to us, but there is something that they're protecting, and our body is trying to protect us from that, which we've deemed more dangerous, like vulnerability or like actually feeling a feeling or remembering something that has happened to us or dealing with a relationship that doesn't feel good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you. That makes a lot of sense. So sort of like the survival mechanism is often the motivator that the body has in the way that it behaves.
Yeah, and until we have capacity or someone to hold space for us to grow capacity, like the work that you do around sexuality, which I would love to hear more on, is like this space of supporting people to find and increase their capacity with something. It's this like tiny levels of discomfort where you are learning, oh, I'm not going to die if I step into this just a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going, like nothing is going to dramatically happen, because our lived experience in our body is that we will die if that happens. Like that's what it feels like. So having a space where you can talk about those things, name them out loud externally, it can shift that to a different part of our brain and allow us to increase that capacity to change.
That makes so much sense. And yeah, just to add to that conversation, so much of the work that I do is building emotional resilience and emotional self-efficacy. And I think like a prerequisite to that is emotional awareness. So when we see emotions come up, they're much more manageable. And a lot of times when we're not connected to our bodies, we're not seeing those emotions come up, right? And then they sort of spill over, right? Like the analogy I always used to use is like, if I walk past a dog that's barking at me and it gives me fear or anger or something, but I don't see it and I'm talking with somebody, like maybe then I become snippy in the conversation because I haven't acknowledged that actually I've got this fear of the dog barking, but now I'm acting like this person is attacking me. I'm like projecting that fear or that anger onto them, right? But when we feel our bodies and become really literate of our own bodies, then we can see those things coming and we can check in with ourselves and say, what am I feeling right now? What's really going on? And then resilience speaks to our ability to come back to center. Like, okay, that thing has happened. Now it's over. How quickly can I recover? Right. And that's just a matter of practice and like awareness in your practice. Right. So as you're building your emotional skills, you're paying attention to it. And then that's where the self-efficacy comes in. Emotional self-efficacy is like, I know I can walk past that barking dog and live. Right. It's just like that. You were saying how there's this like this perceived mortal danger. Right. But self-efficacy is about our ability to imagine being successful. Right. And then we can endeavor into these things that are really challenging, even though they're challenging, like, you know, letting yourself fall in love because you know you're going to survive the heartbreak. Right.
Yeah. There's a beautiful concept that I thought of a couple of years ago. And I don't know if someone told me or, you know, how I came across it, but it's that like all relationships end in heartbreak. Like it's not possible to like, you know, I mean, I guess some people do die at the exact same time, but it's very rare. Relationships end in heartache and they will end. They have an ending date. And we know that, I think, as like in the back, our bodies somewhere know that. So even if you're just like, even if you're like, I'm going to be with this person the rest of my life, there's still this like fear of trusting and being in what you're talking about, going through, walking past the dog, being in these spaces where there is something else going on and trusting that you're going to be okay, trusting your own resiliency.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's, you know, that's what I would call emotional self-efficacy, right? Our ability to imagine that resilience coming through. So
yeah, there's like I love that you named like the naming emotions and also like sensing them in your body, because there's like this, I feel like this happens a lot in self-help spaces where we learn to name emotions and then we intellectualize and then we figure out like, why am I feeling this way? And then we have a long explanation for why this happened and why I felt this way. And we've completely left our body in that process, when like the work is really being in the sensation and being with that and trusting yourself to move literally through it without judgment.
Yeah. And that's a tall order, especially if that's something, you know, as an adult you're coming to having never done. Right.
Which is, I think, most of us.
Yeah. Well, because so many people are taught to just like bury emotions, right? Like just hide it. You're not allowed to cry.
I think that's an American value, isn't it?
Yeah. Stoicism.
Yeah. We're a little better than the Brits, I guess, in expressing emotion.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, okay. So, I was looking on your website and you were talking about your story and you said something that I thought was really powerful. You said, I'm paraphrasing, but you said like, I didn't take a full breath until I was 27, right?
Yeah.
So what happened when you were 27 that catalyzed this change?
Yeah. So I was 27 when I released the concept of hell from my life.
Wow.
And I didn't realize until I released that concept that I had been holding my breath and waiting to see if I was going to be okay. Which, as you know, like we can't predict the future. And even then, I knew that. So there was never a way to know that I was going to be safe or saved. I just couldn't know. And it was this constant, like I had a version of OCD, intrusive thoughts, when I was in junior high, where I was convinced that I couldn't know that I was saved, which if you look at the Bible, it's very confusing about what it means and if it's possible, like, you know, how it happens. And like, there's so many different ways that you can look at that. And even though I like got saved in every single one of those ways at every church camp at every possible moment, confessed my sins, there was always a state of subtle anxiety in me that did not allow me to take a full breath. And about a year, I think, after I moved to Kansas City, maybe 2, I a lot of work had been done in my like mind around this. I was like researching it and like talking with people and starting to like have a shift in my view of the divine from multiple different perspectives, mainly Rob Bell. And I remember having a conversation in my car with God, and I was like, "You love me, right?" And, you know, of course I heard yes. And I'm like, "So you went to all this trouble to like die for me, you know?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "So you're not going to like just get rid of that, right?" And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Okay, I'm going to let this go." And I literally felt myself take a full fucking breath. And I was in like a yoga class that night. And the instructor was saying, like, talking about breathing in your own goodness and feeling that you are good. And I just started weeping. And I know you know this from like the work that you do, but like you reach certain muscles and like these emotions release. And it was just like the combination of that, what I had said earlier that night, and then this person telling me that it's okay to believe and trust that I'm good. And I had never heard that before. And it was like I was breathing for the first time.
That's so powerful.
Yeah. It changed my life.
Yeah, I hear you. I think my awakening came later, you know. Yeah, my awakening came much later. And I was like, well, I guess much later. I was like, you know, early 30s, um but yeah, I think part of my journey was I was gray rocking, where I was like, it's a tactic to protect yourself against narcissists specifically,
Oh,
where you like hide your emotions so
yeah.
that you're not vulnerable, right? We're talking
Yeah.
about hiding our emotions, right? And with a narcissist, they want it to be about them all the time, right? And so if you have a strong emotion, it's a threat to their focus on themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it went deeper than I'm having an emotion, I can't show it. It went to I'm having an emotion, I can't feel it. So I was like, I was actually already studying sex coaching, and we're doing all these exercises that we would, you know, walk our clients through. And I was like, I don't feel anything, guys. Like what? Like y'all are feeling like these big feelings, and I'm just over here getting like a 1 out of 10, a 2 out of 10. Like what's going on? And I'm not even sure how I managed to release that. But when I did, all of my emotions were like 11 out of 10. And I was like, holy shit, like, is this what people are feeling all the time? Like, what's going on? And with something that's really kind of funny is that I didn't have the skill of having an emotion without expressing it, because I was so busy not having the emotion, right? So so for like a month or two, you could tell exactly what I was thinking because it was written all over my face, and I had to like learn to like emote on a reasonable level. And also those emotions like went from 11 out of 10 like back down to like normal levels after I regained perspective. But like
you had a toddler stage.
I was in a toddler stage. That's right. Yeah, that is my excuse for throwing tantrums and running around and peeing my pants. That's
valid.
excuse.
It's valid. So what happened after that? I'm so curious. Like with your emotions, like you realize like I could have felt like this my whole life. I didn't know this was possible. Like what were you like? Were you like, I want to feel all the things, or what happened?
Yeah, no, there was a lot of grief. There was a lot of grief, and I should say that's like the second stage of my awakening. Like my it's funny because in the first stage of my awakening, I really started to like deal with my stuff, and I was in my first marriage, and then my marriage ended, and then I was also married again later, and then as I sort of really developed this self-discovery, it became very threatening to the person that I was with, and so too the second marriage ended. So if I ever get married again, it means I get to have another awakening, and then that gets to end, right? I don't know.
You're like, I know continues. The fucking formula.
But so no, what your question was, what happened with the emotions that I had all of a sudden? Yeah, I think it increased my capacity for compassion, right? Because I could relate to people a lot more, right? All of a sudden, I mean, I could hold space before, but it meant more to me after that, right? And yeah, and I felt so driven to be able to share that experience with people, and to really hold space for people who are on a similar path than me. You know, I mean, that's why my work is primarily focused around acceptance, is because I didn't accept myself in the beginning. I mean, my dialogue in college was like, nobody's going to accept you for who you are. You have to hide parts of yourself. Like you can have like lovers who maybe accept you, but like those aren't going to be healthy people, because healthy people aren't sadomasochists, right? Which was really the most tragic misunderstanding of my life, right? Like I felt like I must have been ill. And I think the fact that it was on the DSM until 2013, like sadomasochism, even if it was consensual, was considered a mental illness until 2013. Right. And I think a lot of people's thinking hasn't changed.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, that's where I was at as well. Unfortunately, I didn't understand that, you know, you can have those sexual interests without it being problematic, without it being the cause of problems in your relationship. Right.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned like this is like you having that experience of now feeling your feelings like propelled you in your work to help to support other people to have that kind of freedom. I felt like a parallel when you were speaking of that, because that's very similar to why I'm passionate about what I do. The freedom of being able to breathe has this like, it's this space in your mind that I didn't know I could have had access to. Where like I remember distinctly, I could be in the silence and it was quiet. Like that experience of peace in my own body and mind was just so overwhelmingly powerful. I was like, this is what some people feel like. What the fuck?
Yeah.
Like everyone deserves this. And why were we not told that this was possible? And like, yeah, everyone needs to feel this if they want to, like, because it's truly profound. It changes your life.
Yeah. Yeah. Quiescence is the word that comes to mind.
That's a thing, or do you made it up?
You'd never guess, but I studied chemistry And when a reaction is violent, eventually it subsides, and then we say it has reached quiescence. It has reached. Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. If you like the Ask Ezra podcast, then let me know. Comment on your favorite episode. Let us know what you enjoyed or what you'd like to see more of. I had a funny experience. We're getting a lot of rain in Southern California, and nobody knows what to do with it. Nobody knows, like
right.
Nobody has the experience with rain in Southern California. So it's this like everybody drives like a lunatic. Everybody's, making makeshift rain jackets because they don't like have one, right? And so I'm driving down the street and everybody's like mid panic. And then there's this one guy who is drenched in a sweatshirt, just absolutely is not getting wetter because he is 100% wet. And he was happy. And I mean, it's warm, right? It's like 65 degrees and raining. So you're not going to like freeze to death out here. And at a certain point, you just have to let it rain, And that I thought was so beautiful. Like there's acceptance embodied, right? This guy can really enjoy the rain because he's not busy trying to avoid it. Right.
Yeah.
And I think so many people are living their lives that way. So many people are living their lives trying not to get wet when like getting wet is life.
Yeah. But like, it's amazing how we're taught not to accept that, and how we're taught like to fight so hard against reality and against being human. And it puts us at complete war with ourselves, because no matter what we do, it's fucking raining. And we can't stop it.
You can't stop the rain.
You can build a fucking bunker, but you'll die in there. Like it's not possible to avoid it entirely.
Yeah, and you can spend your whole life trying not to get wet, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I did spend a lot of years trying not to. It's amazing though, and I wonder if like this person experienced that. Like I've had those moments where like, you're running from a store to your car or whatever, and like you're just trying not to get wet. And then like if you give up, there's just this feeling of relief, and then you're just like, oh I don't have to run. It's water.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's like I don't want to put people down for using umbrellas, but it always feels silly. It's such a complex contraption. And you're still getting wet anyway, like,
yeah.
If you're a photographer, okay. If you have equipment that's going to suffer for getting wet, like, okay. But like humans are like semi-aquatic practically,
Yeah, we came from the water. I have the most hilarious story. There was cameras there. So someone at the hospital got to see me. Okay. I worked at a hospital building, and because staff have to park like a quarter mile away from the building. So I parked pretty far away, had an umbrella, but it was slightly broken. It is raining like, cats and dogs. Like it is raining so fucking hard. And I'm like, I'll just go to the ER. It's closer. Like it's the closest building that I can cut in there. So I like step out of my car and I'm like, holding my umbrella. It's instantly like my pants and feet are getting wet. I step into a puddle. At the same time, I run into a tree with my umbrella. My umbrella turns inside out in the tree, and I'm yanking my umbrella out of the tree while, of course, I'm completely soaked. And I step in a puddle that's like a half-foot deep. I really, really hope someone like got to joyfully watch that happen to me. Because I like walk into the ER and I'm just like head to toe. I'm like, I'm fine.
Yeah.
It's just
that's hilarious. Yeah.
Now I need new scrubs.
So much struggle trying to keep your protection in place, right?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So silly.
That's hilarious. And I enjoyed hearing it. I enjoyed your suffering now, if it's any consolation.
Oh, I enjoyed it then. I was laughing so fucking hard. I was like, this is so ridiculous. I love it.
Yep. So tell me, you mentioned that one of your coaching styles is like redefining self relationship coaching. Did I
Yeah.
get that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what does that mean?
Yeah. Redefining self-relationship is like getting to take back the roles that we were handed. So we're taught how to relate to other people and to ourselves, right? We're taught to do that in a guarded way. We're taught to wear a rain jacket and carry an umbrella. Like we're taught how to relate to other people with this resistance to humanity. And we're taught to relate to ourselves in a very similar way with this space of dominance that comes from white supremacy and capitalism and religion. It has the same dominating concept that we are to mind over matter, control our bodies, and, make them into submission to ourselves. And in that, we take on a lot of those beliefs about who we are from those systems and we internalize them. So we have a whole way of relating to ourselves that is rooted in systems that don't serve us and were not made for us. So redefining relationship is taking that back and deciding what does work for you and actually taking a fucking look at it, because no one is the same, but you should be allowed to decide for yourself what works for you and how you can relate to yourself in a way that feels nurturing and whole.
That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, it's a lot of intention. I wouldn't say necessarily work. It takes a lot of intention and attention because we're so used to being distracted.
Yeah, and I see you avoiding that phrase work because it's like so charged, right?
Yeah, I mean it has the air of productivity and like this concept of like do instead of be. And I really think that doing can often distract us from the being with our physical experience and the sensations that you were talking about earlier. Like I know that's true for me. Like I'll literally do anything to avoid. I had an eating disorder for like 5 years to avoid being with the feeling of a relationship that I wasn't happy in. I didn't want to be with that, so I just avoided it. It's so easy for us to deal with a problem that our mind is familiar with solving, even if it's harming us, because our brain is like, no, we know how to solve this. It's not unknown, and sometimes it can feel really unknown for us to be with those experiences.
Yeah, and I think that's so powerful, like the distinction between doing and being. And part of my practice is attunement, right? And it's so challenging because if no one had ever heard of meditation, the work would be so much easier, right? But we all have these like experiences of being like, oh, I'm not meditating right. I'm not meditating hard enough. I'm not getting that quietness. I'm not like, I still have thoughts, right? And so it's like, whoa, slow down. And to me, I try to define meditation or attunement really as like the cultivation of awareness, right? Mindfulness is the cultivation of awareness. Just be aware. Just be in a state of awareness. And that's it,
Yeah. And that intention can be tiring when our brains are not used to it. But you're right. I really think that yoga and meditation, because they've been so whitewashed, we have a very certain expectation of what it looks like. And we've often not been taught like from originators of the practice. We've just heard from our white yoga instructor what to do. And we were just like, oh, I'm supposed to have this blissful, like zened out because my social media influencers told me that they feel peaceful all the time because they meditate, and it's not working for me.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it doesn't look like it does on Instagram. I must be doing it wrong.
Yeah, it's an Insta fail instead of a Pinterest fail.
There you go. Yeah. No, I actually studied yoga pretty extensively, and I studied the Ashtanga yoga, and they talk about like the 8 limbs of yoga, and the 8 limbs, only one of them is like how you hold your body.
Right.
Right. And so it's like, well, that's an eighth. We're talking about 12.5%.
Yeah. what's the rest? Like you're missing the entire holistic perspective of, do no harm and all the others. So, how long ago did you study that, and how did that impact your emotional awakening?
Okay, so it's interesting because I could not sit still until I studied yoga. Right, like I was diagnosed like attention deficit hyperactive disorder, and it wasn't until I was like 16 and I was doing like an hour of yoga in the morning and an hour of yoga in the evening, and
At
then I
16?
could like, yeah, absolutely.
Look at you.
And then well, I had an early arc, right, because I'm all out of shape now, but like my knee never stopped bouncing until I could use yoga to like get it out of my system. And then I could actually experience that like physical quietude where like my body had what it needed. And I was like, oh. And so I came to understand yoga as like the threshold to meditation. So if I do the physical postures, now I can actually meditate. In my practice, we practice like externalizing feelings, right? And so not only naming it, but then we can think about how we would treat it as if it was a house guest, or how we would treat our emotions if they were a puppy, right? So by like bringing them outside of ourselves, we can actually see how that relationship looks and say, how do we address that feeling? How do we address that sadness, that loneliness, that anger, whatever, right?
Yeah, that's why Inside Out was such a revolutionary movie.
Yeah, no, it's really good. I know a lot of therapists who like that movie a lot.
Yeah. I feel like that I use that a lot in my own practice as well, of self-compassion, which is something I tend to speak about with my clients. Is like this, it can be hard to find compassion for ourselves immediately. So if you need to, like, externalizing the show of compassion, like showing it to your inner child, like imagining your inner child as someone you're giving that to, because it can be easier to offer something to a child, especially kindness, than it is to offer it to our adult selves. There's like, I mean, this is so bizarre. Like, we see ourselves in so many different ways, and no one else can see us how we see us. And we can't see ourselves how they see us. So like, it's such a fluid thing to be able to play with. Like, you can externalize emotions, you can choose how you see yourself, and you can never control how someone else sees you. But there's like so much power in deciding, I'm actually like, I'm this person, and these are the things that I'm going to feed or focus on or put my attention into, and have that change how you see yourself, which then changes everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's get back on to it here. I got my agenda. So tell me, who's your favorite kind of client?
I have a couple different archetypes, and I have like an archetype quiz right now that kind of puts them into 4 different categories. But ideally, it's someone who is self-aware and smart. There's someone who knows themselves to be smart. They've done some work. They are aware of themselves and some of the issues they have, but they still beat themselves up. They're still really hard on themselves when they're alone, and they're struggling with making time for themselves, even though they're dedicated to the people they love and the people they serve. Most of my clients are in helping professions, like social workers, therapists, coaches, other forms of help, where they're really taught to prioritize everyone else over themselves. And we can really get into some incredible work in reshifting how they relate to themselves as another person, because they already have a framework for what that looks like. They just need to shift it on themselves, and we work through those feelings and experiences of what that means, why there's resistance there, and increase their capacity for that discomfort. And it's really powerful what happens.
I love that. You're the healer.
Yeah.
That's great. I was I briefly saw an EMDR therapist who was like, all I want to see is other therapists. So
they need it.
It's true. Yeah, therapists need therapists. Coaches need coaches. Absolutely.
Doctors need doctors.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you're not going to operate on yourself.
No, it's really like I was saying earlier, it's impossible to see yourself. Like you can't objectively see yourself. You can be self-observant, you can be so self-aware, but like you can't, there's things that other people see that you can't see. And if you don't have someone trusted around you, you're going to have that reflected back to you from narcissists and from people you can't trust. So bringing a support system around you, like you, in the realm of this space, you've got someone who is lovingly and compassionately looking at you and able to show you things in a space that feels safe and trusting. And that can create incredible change.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got just a couple more questions for you here,
Okay.
Christina. So the next one is, what's like the most challenging thing that you experience in your work?
I think my ADHD has been one of those things. It went undiagnosed until earlier this year. And before then, I was really beating myself up about having a hard time dropping in and remembering things and keeping things organized. And yeah, again, it's like we judge ourselves when we don't have all the information. And I was judging myself for not having all the information. So kind of like moving through the process of settling into that realization, what kind of permission that gives me, and yeah, bringing in support. I have 3 coaches and a therapist, so I have plenty of support around me to help me.
What a tremendous support network.
Literally, I got into this work so that I could, get support.
There you go. Yeah. Do you ever do service trading? Like one of the things I do is I'll work with other coaches and say, I'll coach you and you coach me.
Yes, I have like 3 people I do that with.
Fantastic. Awesome. Okay, so my final and most challenging question, Christina, how can people get a hold of you? And
Oh
what
my
do you have
God.
going on?
I don't know if I can answer it. My website is ChristinaCarlson.com. That's my full name. And my Instagram is at Christina Carlson Life Coach. And those are the 2 places I'm most active. My podcast is Bitches, Witches, and Queers, and you can find that on any platform you listen to podcasts. It's fucking fantastic conversations and solo episodes with me, sharing interesting tips around spirituality in real everyday life. And what I'm up to now is really working on this redefining relationship aspect. Honestly, so I'm an energy coach as well, certified through Devoted Energy Coaching School. And we have this practice called following the breadcrumbs. And right now I'm following the breadcrumbs of what that offer is leading me to, because I feel like there's a lot of doors that it's opening up for me that I'm really excited around. But if you want to work with me, that's mainly the things that we'll be working on, and you will be following the breadcrumbs in your own life.
Sounds wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah, it's tasty and gluten-free.
Okay. What if I want the gluten?
Then you can have all the gluten you want in your breadcrumbs.
Awesome. Well, thank you again.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks for watching the Ask Ezra Intimacy Coaching Podcast. Support our show at patreon.com/AskEzra. Join us at the personal growth tier and receive a special thank you on the next podcast episode. A very special thank you to both Sarah Nash and Deb Matson for being Patreon supporters at the personal growth tier and helping make the Ask Ezra Intimacy Coaching Podcast possible.